Hello everyone, my name is Rick Simpson, and I am recognized by many as being the man who brought the healing powers of cannabis extracts to the public's attention. Recently I was contacted by the Greek Cannabis Legalization Campaign to answer some questions for an upcoming event which is scheduled to be held in Athens on the 5th and 6th of November 2016. So here are the questions I was given, and I hope that my answers will be helpful in bringing an end to all the pain and suffering which the outlawing of this plant has caused. Question number 1. What international developments regarding cannabis do you consider as promising? The greatest international development, which gives me hope that mankind may still have a decent future, revolves around the ability of the internet to bring the truth to people everywhere concerning what I consider to be the greatest crime which has ever been committed in all human history. The cannabis hemp plant is by far the most medicinal and otherwise useful plant that we have at our disposal to solve most of the problems we are currently facing. Yet a few decades ago, with the use of lies and deceptions, very dark and sinister forces were able to have this gift from nature outlawed, and since that time, we have all suffered the consequences of their actions. But today, many of us are beginning to recognize the fact that those who perpetrated this crime are actually nothing more than overly wealthy, sick-minded individuals and families who are themselves little more than criminals of the highest order. Since all of this is now rapidly becoming public knowledge, I believe that this revelation will be instrumental in bringing an end to the suffering and destruction which has been caused by the rich elite and the governments which have always seemed to bow to their wishes. Question number 2. In your opinion, what do you think is the best way to regulate cannabis? Is there something like an ideal model of cannabis regulation and legalization that you feel would suit the public's needs? In my opinion, and that of many others, those of us who wish to grow and use the cannabis plant to fulfill our medical requirements should not be restrained by regulations or restrictions of any kind. The only regulation which I feel must be considered concerns those who wish to supply the public with cannabis medications on a large scale. In such a case, quality control and standards must be maintained to protect the public from unscrupulous business practices. But we as individuals who wish to grow and use this plant to reap all the benefits it can provide should not be molested in any way by our governments for doing so. We grew and used this plant for thousands of years without the use of regulations or interference from those in authority. So why should we need to put up with this type of nonsense today? The regulations which many governments wish to impose have nothing to do with public safety. The only reason this approach is being used is to cover up government corruption in the past and to allow their rich masters to remain in control. Cannabis is simply a non-addictive, harmless plant which has been a staple of agriculture since ancient times. In fact, it has been widely reported that cannabis could very well be man's first cultivated crop. Since no one in history has ever been harmed or died from this plant's effects, then why should we allow regulations to be forced upon us now? At present, countries like Slovenia, Chile, and also a few others appear to be taking a rational approach to setting the use of the cannabis plant free once more. But I consider what is taking place in the US and many other countries like Canada to be nothing more than madness, which in truth is actually based on the wants and needs of the rich and powerful, and not on what is best for the health and well-being of their own people. Many governments are trying to confuse their citizens by using words like legalization and decriminalization as being a solution to allowing the medicinal use of cannabis. But I hope that the people of Greece are wise enough to see that this is simply just more government double talk. Since both of these terms governments tend to use, still come with many restrictions and regulations that no government actually even has the right to enforce. The proper way for governments to resolve this issue is to simply repeal all these absurd laws and finally begin to react to the needs of their citizens. For in truth, all the restrictions concerning the free growing and use of this plant were based on nothing more than a pack of lies, and I feel that it is time for all governments to bring an end to this travesty. Question 3. Based on your experience, what is the most important therapeutic elements of cannabis that we should further explore as a society? Do you believe that cannabis can provide a form of healing for the whole of humanity? From my experience, I feel that the most important thing to do regarding cannabis at present is to bring the medications this plant can provide up to their highest healing levels and see that patients have access to these life-saving medicines as quickly as possible. Some governments and those who are involved with the pharmaceutical industry have conducted their own medical research regarding this plant in the past, but sadly this information has been withheld from the public for many decades now. Since it has now become more than clear that we cannot put our trust in most governments, and that one would have to be a complete fool to put any faith at all in what the pharmaceutical industry would have us believe, I think that it would be best for us to begin by simply using what we already know about this plant's true healing abilities as a foundation for further research, the results of which should be made freely available to anyone who has an interest. Now let's look at what we already know about the healing abilities of this plant. The use of cannabis in medicine is legendary, and there are written records concerning this plant's medicinal use which go back almost 5,000 years. In many circles, cannabis is regarded as being man's oldest known and safest medication, and this is a great deal more than can be said for the poison addictive trash which our current medical systems often tend to employ. In addition, cannabis and the medications it produces are harmless and non-addictive in nature, and medicines such as this actually do follow the Hippocratic Oath, which, as I understand it, the practice of medicine is supposed to be based upon. From my own experience with cannabis extracts, I can honestly tell you that if there were no other forms of medicine on this planet, we would still have very little to worry about. Since cannabis extracts can now replace the use of all those dangerous and often addictive pharmaceuticals, I am now convinced that the cannabinoids these extracts contain will soon change the face of medicine as we know it forever, and will offer the public methods to heal themselves which are much more sensible and rational in nature than what is currently available. Question 4. What would you suggest to Greek patients to enable them to trust and accept cannabis as a healing medium? And in what way can they demand from the state their right to self-medication? I am not here in the hope of convincing those who do not wish to listen to common sense that cannabis can offer us all a much better way to heal ourselves and even provide us with a much more sensible and sustainable existence. So for those who tend to think that they know more about medicine than all the top experts in the field of cannabis research, they can still feel free to seek other methods of treatment. I have simply produced this video in the hope of encouraging those who have an interest in this subject to do a little simple research for themselves to prove that what I have stated is completely true. There is a great deal of misinformation concerning cannabis on many internet sites and elsewhere, so I leave it up to those who have an interest in this subject to determine the real truth for themselves concerning what they choose to believe. To make it somewhat easier for those who are seeking the truth about the healing powers of cannabis extracts, I suggest that they go to YouTube and view some of the many testimonials which are available from patients who have used cannabis extracts to deal with their medical issues. If these individuals take the time to do as I have asked, I am sure that they will come to the conclusion that indeed cannabis extracts do have amazing healing powers, and that our current medical systems are much more concerned with producing profits than they are in providing real medical treatments which actually work for the benefit of the patients. As for demanding the natural right from the state to freely use medicines such as cannabis extracts, all the people of Greece have to do is ask their government this question. Since cannabis has never posed a danger to the human race, who actually has the right to prevent any of us from using a natural God-given plant to heal ourselves or our loved ones? Did the Almighty suddenly provide governments with the right to do this? And if not, just what do these governments think gives them the authority to overrule God's wishes? The cannabis plant actually belongs to us all, and no government or anyone else ever had the right to outlaw its free use in the first place. So I believe that it's time for the people of Greece to stand up and tell their government that they have put up with more than enough of this nonsense, and that they will no longer tolerate this injustice any longer. If the government of Greece will not comply with the wishes of their people, then I think that it can only be said that a new election is long overdue. Thank you very much for your time.